Hello, and welcome to our podcast episode number 68, A Journey into the Heart of Darkness, One Man's Descent into Madness. I am Timothy, and I am here with my old friend Thomas. Tonight we are going to discuss a film called Apocalypse Now. Apocalypse Now is a 1979 American epic war film directed by Francis Ford Coppola, starring Martin Sheen, Marlon Brando, and Robert Duvall. Set during the Vietnam War in 1969, Captain Willard is tasked with assassinating Colonel Kurtz, who has allegedly gone rogue and lost his mind. The film follows their journey upriver to Cambodia as they encounter various challenges, both physically and mentally. Well, Thomas, did you enjoy Apocalypse Now?
It was quite the experience. I didn't particularly enjoy it, if we're being honest.
Oh, that's a shame. I thought it was an excellent film.
Hey, to each their own, I suppose.
I thought it had some truly memorable moments, and the cinematography was top-notch.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. The visuals were stunning.
And the performances. Martin Sheen, Marlon Brando, Robert Duvall, all of them did an incredible job.
They were good, but it didn't make up for the slow pacing and the seemingly endless runtime.
I didn't find it too slow, and at 3 hours long, it doesn't feel like a chore to watch. The story is captivating enough to keep you engaged throughout.
To each their own, I guess. For me, it just felt like a slog.
Well, as always, we have different tastes in films, Thomas. That's what makes these discussions so interesting.
Agreed. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to know more about the plot. What was the character arc of Captain Willard? How did he change throughout the film?
Yes, Captain Willard's character arc is quite interesting indeed. When we first meet him, he appears as a dedicated and disciplined soldier who follows orders without question. However, as the journey continues upriver and he learns more about Colonel Kurtz, his view on the war and his mission changes. He starts to question whether or not Kurtz is really the monster everyone claims he is, and even if he is killing him the right thing to do? These doubts slowly eat away at his psyche, and by the end of the film, he's no longer the same man. The culmination of this journey can be seen in the famous "I love the smell of napalm in the morning" scene, where Willard, who was once a by-the-book soldier, uses the same tactics as Kurtz to achieve his goal. It's a powerful transformation that showcases the toll war can take on even the most seasoned veterans.
I see what you mean. The change in character was definitely there. But for me, it wasn't enough to make up for the slow pace and unnecessary scenes. Do you think Francis Ford Coppola managed to capture the true horror of the Vietnam War in this film?
I believe he did a commendable job at showcasing the brutal nature of war.
Especially during the infamous ride of the Valkyrie sequence, where the American helicopters indiscriminately attack a village. It was a clear example of how war can turn men into monsters and the consequences that follow. However, I also think he went a bit overboard with some of the symbolism and metaphor, like the heart of darkness being represented by Kurtz's compound. It felt a bit heavy-handed at times.
That's an interesting perspective. For me, it was just too much. The violence was gratuitous, and the scenes with the French plantation owner and his daughter were unnecessary and out of place. I didn't see any real connection to the main plot.
Fair enough. We all have different interpretations of art, after all. Now, Thomas, since you have a knack for trivia, do you know any interesting behind-the-scenes tidbits about Apocalypse Now?
Well, one fun fact is that the helicopter attack scene with Marlon Brando was completely improvised on the spot. Apparently, Coppola wanted to capture the chaos of war and decided to go with it. That must have been quite an experience for everyone involved.
That's fascinating. I love hearing stories like that where the magic happens on set. It just goes to show how talented and creative Francis Ford Coppola is as a director. Speaking of which, did you know that he had originally planned for a much shorter film without any of the iconic scenes we all know and love?
Really? I didn't know that. Do tell.
Well, according to Coppola, he initially intended for Apocalypse Now to be more of a straightforward war film, focused on Captain Willard's journey upriver to confront Colonel Kurtz. However, as production went on and they encountered various challenges such as bad weather and equipment malfunctions, it seems that these obstacles inspired him even further into exploring deeper themes like madness and the horrors of war. This resulted in some iconic sequences being added or expanded upon, including the infamous ride of the Valkyrie scene, which was originally supposed to be much shorter, but ended up taking an entire day to film due to technical difficulties.
That's amazing. It just goes to show that sometimes obstacles can lead us down paths we never thought possible. And speaking of those iconic scenes, what about the now infamous ride of the Valkyrie scene? I heard it was inspired by a similar event in history. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, indeed. That particular scene is based on an actual incident during the Vietnam War where American troops were playing Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries from Apocalypse Now as they attacked a village. Coppola thought it would be powerful to use this same song in his film, but with a twist. Instead of being played for inspiration or intimidation, it becomes something darker and more sinister as the helicopters indiscriminately attack civilians. This juxtaposition adds another layer of depth to an already iconic scene and serves as a powerful critique on warfare in general.
That's really interesting. It just goes to show how much thought went into this film, even down to its smallest details. Now, since we've been talking about the novel Apocalypse Now, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how well the film adapted the source material.
Well, it does stay true to the overall story and themes of the novel, but there are some notable differences as well. For one thing, in the book, Captain Willard is not as much of a protagonist. Instead, we get more insight into Kurtz's character, which makes him seem even more enigmatic and terrifying. The film also streamlines certain aspects of the story, like cutting out entire characters or combining them with others while adding new elements such as Brando's character being based on a combination of two characters from the book. Overall, I think Coppola did an excellent job adapting the novel for film by highlighting what works best about it and transforming it into something visually stunning and emotionally powerful.
That's fascinating. I haven't read the novel myself, but it seems like Coppola made some smart choices in his adaptation process. Now, moving on from Apocalypse Now to other works by Francis Ford Coppola, do you have any favorite films or projects of his?
That's a great question, Thomas. I personally think Francis Ford Coppola is one of the most talented filmmakers of all time, and he has directed several masterpieces throughout his career. Some of my favorites include the Godfather trilogy, which showcases his ability to tell epic stories about powerful families and the consequences of their actions. I also love Bram Stoker's Dracula for its stunning visuals and unique take on a classic tale. However, if we're talking specifically about Apocalypse Now, one thing that really stands out is the performances by Martin Sheen, Robert Duvall, and of course, Marlon Brando, who all delivered incredible portrayals of their characters. It was amazing to see these legendary actors come together for such an iconic film.
Agreed. The performances were truly outstanding, which is no surprise considering the cast involved. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about some of the controversies surrounding Apocalypse Now. I read that there was some criticism regarding the portrayal of Vietnamese characters in the film and how it might perpetuate stereotypes. What are your thoughts on this matter?
That is a valid concern, Thomas. There have been accusations that Apocalypse Now contributes to the exoticization and dehumanization of Vietnamese people through its portrayal of characters like Lance B. Johnson, who seems more concerned with killing than actual combat operations. Additionally, some scenes, such as those involving Playboy's French plantation owner, Mr. Brando's character's daughter, could be seen as reinforcing harmful stereotypes about both Vietnamese people and colonialism itself. While it is important to remember that Francis Ford Coppola was trying to create a commentary film about warfare, there are definitely moments where he could have done a better job at representing diverse perspectives on screen. However, this doesn't mean we should write off the entire production as racist and misguided. Attempt to make films like these due to their nature. They still provoke conversation, staple our society today about representation of marginalized groups in media.
That's an excellent point. Now, moving on from Apocalypse. Now let's discuss other works by Francis Ford Coppola, where he did an amazing job at representing diverse perspectives on television show. This doesn't mean we should write off the entire production. It's a conversation about Vietnamese history, marginalized group of friends, filmmakers and media analysts, and culture enthusiasts. Their lives in particular way, they spent years watching war films together for decades. But today, there are also many controversially historical events.
Yes, indeed, Thomas. The portrayal of Vietnamese people in Apocalypse Now is a complex topic and one that requires careful consideration. It's important to remember that the film was made during a time when Hollywood had very few Asian actors in leading roles, making it difficult for Coppola to find someone who could convincingly play the part of Willard's Vietnamese guy. Chef. However, despite these limitations, I believe he did his best to represent both the American and Vietnamese perspectives fairly throughout the film. In terms of characterization, I think Martin Sheen as Captain Willard and Marlon Brando as Colonel Kurtz are standouts in their respective roles. Both men bring a depth and complexity to their characters that make them compelling figures on screen. Sheen's performance is particularly notable for its nuance. He portrays Willard as someone who initially believes in the war, but gradually loses faith in his mission and himself. This journey of self-discovery is what makes Willard such an interesting character to watch throughout the film. On the other hand, Brando's portrayal of Kurtz is one that has been widely discussed among critics and audiences alike. Some argue that he plays into stereotypes about madness and colonialism, while others see him as a tragic figure who represents America's hubris in Vietnam. Personally, I find his performance captivating because it challenges us to think about what happens when power corrupts absolute authority without accountability or oversight. Now, Thomas, do you have any favorite characters from Apocalypse Now? Beyond the main cast, are there any performances that stand out to you as particularly memorable?
I have to admit, I'm quite partial to the character of Lance B. Johnson, played by Sam Bottom. He is a helicopter pilot who seems unfazed by the horrors of war around him and instead focuses on his own survival. Despite being a supporting character, he leaves a lasting impression due to his cold demeanor and ruthless efficiency in combat situations. It's an interesting contrast to Captain Willard's internal struggle with the morality of his mission. Another performance that stood out for me was Frederick Forrest as Chief Phillips. He is one of the few surviving members from Kurtz's compound who joins Willard on his journey back downriver. His character is haunted by what he witnessed at Kurtz's camp, but remains loyal to both his country and comrades. Forrest delivers a powerful performance that highlights the human cost of war on both individuals and society. Overall, I think Apocalypse Now has an exceptional cast, with each actor bringing something unique to their role. It makes for a rich tapestry of characters that help bring this complex story to life. Now, Timothy, if you don't mind, could we discuss the cultural significance of this film? How do you feel it has impacted the way we view war films today? And what legacy does it leave behind in terms of its influence on other directors or works within the genre?
I believe Apocalypse Now has had a profound impact on how we view war films today. It challenges traditional depictions of heroism and patriotism. Instead, focusing on the psychological toll that war takes on individuals, the film's use of non-linear storytelling and surreal imagery also set it apart from other Vietnam War movies, creating a more immersive experience for audiences. This approach has been emulated by many directors since its release, demonstrating the lasting influence of Apocalypse Now within the genre in terms of cultural significance. I think Apocalypse Now serves as a reminder that war is not glamorous or easily digestible. It exposes viewers to the brutal reality of AM combat and how it can change people in ways they never expected. This message is especially relevant today given our increasing reliance on technology for warfare. By bringing us face to face with the human cost of conflict, the film encourages us to question whether these technologies make us any safer or more civilized as a society.
I agree that Apocalypse Now has had an immense impact on how we view war films today. It was groundbreaking in its use of surrealism and non-linear storytelling, which made the audience question their own perceptions of reality. This innovative approach also made it more relatable to a younger generation who were growing up during the Vietnam War era, but had no personal experience with combat. The film's cultural significance cannot be overstated either. It challenged societal norms about what constituted heroism and patriotism, ultimately leading to a more nuanced understanding of these concepts. Additionally, Apocalypse Now highlighted the importance of representing diverse perspectives in media, something that is still relevant today as we strive for greater representation across all industries. Now, moving on from Apocalypse, now let's talk about some other works by Francis Ford Coppola. What are your thoughts on The Conversation? I think it's an underrated masterpiece with some truly brilliant performances.
That's a great choice, Tom. The Conversation is indeed an incredible film and one of my favorites from Coppola. It's a psychological thriller about a surveillance expert who becomes obsessed with uncovering the truth behind his client's conversation. The film explores themes like privacy paranoia and guilt in such an intelligent way that keeps you on the edge of your seat until the very end. Another interesting aspect of The Conversation is how it reflects the changing political climate during the late 1960s and early 1970s, just like Apocalypse. Now, this film challenges our perceptions about power dynamics within society by showing us how surveillance can be used as a tool to control people's lives. It's a powerful message that still resonates today with our increasing reliance on technology for communication and data collection. Now, let's move on to some other topics related to film or television shows. Is there any specific genre you prefer over others? Or do you watch anything that catches your interest regardless of the genre?
That's very interesting, Timothy. It's fascinating how films can reflect the social and political climate of their time, even decades after they were made. Now, speaking of The Conversation, have you seen any other works by Francis Ford Coppola that are underrated or overlooked? I think there are many gems hidden within his filmography waiting to be discovered by new audiences.
Well, Thomas, one film that stands out for me is Rumblefish from 1983. It's a coming of age drama set in a small town where two brothers struggle with their conflicting dreams and desires. The cinematography is absolutely stunning, and the performances by Mickey Rourke. Matt Dillon and Diane Lane are top-notch. I also highly recommend watching Tetro, which was released in 2009, starring Vincent Gallo. And Marlon Brando is father and son trying to reconnect after many years apart. It's a beautiful film about family relationships and the power of art to heal deep emotional wounds. Now let's get back to discussing Apocalypse Now one last time before we wrap up tonight's podcast. Thomas, what were your final thoughts on the film? Do you agree with my assessment that it is an anti-war statement, or do you think there are other interpretations of its message?
I can see where you're coming from, Timothy, but I personally don't think Apocalypse Now is an anti-war film. To me, it's more about the complexity and chaos of war, rather than a clear-cut statement against it. The film explores various themes like power corruption, insanity, and moral ambiguity that are present in all forms of conflict, not just wars. It challenges us to question our own beliefs about what constitutes heroism or villainy, and forces us to confront the darkest parts of human nature. In a way, Apocalypse Now is like a mirror reflecting back at us our own capacity for violence and destruction when pushed beyond our limits. Well, Timothy, that concludes our discussion on Apocalypse Now for tonight. It's been an interesting journey exploring this film from its themes to its impact on cinema history. I hope you found our conversation engaging and informative as always, my friend. Before we sign off, let me remind our viewers to leave a like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed today's podcast, and share it with your friends, family, or anyone who might be interested in watching along with us next time. Until then, take care and see you soon.
Thank you, Tom, for another insightful discussion about one of my favorite films. I look forward to our next episode where we can dive into a new movie and share our thoughts on it. Until then, stay safe and healthy, everyone.